A Catholic priest, against the wishes of his superiors, tracks down an international art thief, but along the way becomes more interested in reforming him. In the 1954 Robert Hamer film, The Detective, starring Alec Guinness, based on the Father Brown series by G.K. Chesterton. That's the film we'll be digging into today on Movie Bones. I'll be right up front, Ryan. I really like Father Brown. So much that I really hope maybe one day they'll make a movie about him that doesn't forget what makes him so great to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there, this week's film is The Detective, a.k.a. Father Brown, depending on where you're watching it. It's about a priest from the title, played by Alec Guinness, who's also really into solving mysteries. And martial arts and, of course, saving souls. We first meet him kind of giving up to the cops after getting caught in the act of a reverse burglary, returning an item stolen by a penitent who came to him for absolution. And of all the things the police take from him, the thing he's most upset about is that they confiscated his chocolate, which kind of gives you a bit of an insight into his character early on. The plot starts to take shape when there's a relic inside of the church he's the pastor of, and it's being requested by the Vatican to be put on display in the Vatican in Rome. So it's going to be transported from his church in England to Rome. But there's also a relatively well-known thief, an infamous art thief known as Flambeau, who is rumored to be interested in using the opportunity to steal it. Which, of course, if you're Father Brown and you're into mysteries and that kind of stuff in the first place, he naturally just gravitates towards being intrigued by someone who would want to steal it. And so they have several encounters with each other over the course of over the movie. And that's the setup of the film, Ryan. So we were talking a bit about this before we started recording, but I was a bit frustrated by this. The movie does two things. It does one thing really, really well, which is its characters, the two main characters. And I love that. But there's another part to it, and it's a bit of a disappointment that way, but we'll get into that in more detail. But let me get your first thoughts. What do you think?
We probably agree on our feelings in this movie. For those of you, I'm just going to go ahead and get this out of the way. One of the reasons why I would recommend this movie, there's multiple reasons to recommend this movie. One, if you have read the books, and there's like a series of books, you're probably going to like it. But if you've seen the TV series, again, just that kind of lore will push you to this movie. And then also, it's a good performance. And when I say good, I'm not like saying, it's not like on a scale. It's just a good performance by Alec Guinness. And so, like everything I've seen him in, I've found to be enjoyable for the most part, so far anyways. And I will say, prior to doing this right here, prior to talking about old movies, I had only ever seen Alec Guinness in Star Wars, and I loved him in Star Wars. And now I will say, kind of a side note, he looks like two totally different people. And of course, that has to do with age.
Yeah.
But he looks like two totally different people by the time he's doing Star Wars and in the movies that I've seen him in.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, about Alec Guinness, because recognizing him, I wonder if it has something to do a little bit with the glasses. Because if all you've known of him was Obi-Wan Kenobi, like you and I previously were before going to the older movies, Obi-Wan Kenobi never wears glasses, of course. Because both of the films we've watched him in so far have involved him. He always wears glasses. Maybe he just needed them as a younger actor. Maybe got contacts later on. I don't know. When it comes to the character of Father Brown as written, I think at least by G.K. Chesterton, and I haven't read the books either, but the impression I get of Father Brown, it makes him distinct from every other kind of detective that's out there that you've seen. All the good detectives, all the great detectives you see in literature and film, they all have a certain MO, right? They all have something that attracts you to them as opposed to other detectives. So, for example, you've got, on TV, you had Columbo, right? His big shtick was, look at me, I'm a slob. Don't take me seriously until you realize that I've been taking advantage of you the whole time, right? He completely turns it around because everyone thinks he's an idiot because of the way he dresses and acts. And that inverts things. That was his thing. If someone were to do something like that, you would say, oh, that's Columbo. Or and let's say like Monk, Adrian Monk from the TV series back in the 90s. He's OCD, right? His thing is he uses his OCD to help solve crimes, right? And you could go through the same thing with like Sherlock Holmes, or every one of them has distinctive attributes about them. But for me, what makes Father Brown really interesting and probably set apart from the others, it also makes me like his detective a little bit better too, is that for him, the MacGuffin or whatever the central thing of the piece is, in this case, the Cross of St. Augustine, is less material to him than the person he's tracking down. The person he's tracking down, the criminal, is actually more important to him. And I think because he doesn't forget the humanity of the people he's dealing with. He probably ranks as one of my favorite detectives now because of that aspect alone.
I can understand that. You're right. It does definitely go after, he's not, especially, well, at least in this movie anyways, it's not so much solving a crime as in finding the criminal and trying to appeal to him. And in reading up on it a little bit more, so Flambeau is actually like what is considered in the books or in the stories is considered like his arch nemesis. From what I'm reading, he appears in 48 short stories about the character Father Brown. So, and sometimes that's kind of the issue with movies. The movie will fall short because you can't cover everything that happens in a book in a movie. And so, you're probably getting a lot of, we're not well known on this series. I want to make that clear. But you're probably getting a lot of stuff that happened in those books, kind of crammed into this movie. And it can overwhelm it a little bit. But, the character work is still really well done.
I really liked Flambeau too. I mean, I don't want to put Peter Finch's work down. Peter Finch plays Flambeau, the art thief, and
Yeah.
because he does a really good job of there's the verbal banter between them is very interesting all in its own right, because they're really penetrating. They're trying to figure each other out, and they're almost a little bit intrigued by each other. And unlike a lot of this, Flambeau is not like a murderous type. It's like you can actually have a dialogue with him, and he can actually be intrigued by someone else. It's because he has opportunities to actually harm Father Brown or to do things to him, and he actually spares him of that too. It's like, I don't know if like Holmes and Moriarty ever had something like that. I don't think they ever did. It's a much more antagonistic relationship, which is the case, I think, for most of the types of mysteries that we're dealing with. Let's get to the part of the film which, in my opinion, and probably and maybe yours too, Ryan, you have these really well-drawn characters, and then you kind of have a series of events which kind of undermines the tone. Certain things like cat and mouse, the games, which aren't all that clever. Like there's a scene where they're trying to escape because actually, oddly enough, they're trying to protect Flambeau because they don't want the cops to get him. And so they have to help Flambeau escape. And they do it by one of the most obvious kind of distractions, you know what I mean? And the scene takes a little bit longer, in your mind at least, because you know what they're doing. You know that they're setting up a bait and switch, but they're still playing it straight like, oh, the audience isn't going to know what we're about to do, except that you do. That could just be partly our modern intuitions entering into it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've been sitting in that kind of area of this is definitely what they were trying to do a lot in the movie. Worked back then, and it worked because it just was that time period. It worked for that time period.
Either that or just I wonder how many times those things have been used before, if it wasn't still new,
Yeah, because when you're introduced to Flambeau, you don't know it's Flambeau. But I will say, I mean, I'm not even trying to be spoiler here. When you see him, you're going, okay, that's it.
That's him.
That's very much him.
Because, he's one of those master of disguise types, except if you're the audience member, it's not so much of a disguise. It's like he looks like a villainous type. He doesn't, at least to his credit, Peter Finch does not play it up. He doesn't sell the fact that he's Flambeau to the audience, like wink, wink, nod, nod. He does his part, but it's like, I guess it's the costuming. For me, it's like first of all, you put a beard on him, a goatee, and a mustache, which
that's what I was about to say. I was like, if we have any Star Trek fans here, like
evil
especially evil Star Trek. I don't know if they've always done this, but I remember it vividly in The Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
Everything like their counter selves always had goatees.
Yeah. Facial hair is a mark of the devil every time, don't you know, man?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, but Star Trek is where you first, I think it becomes embedded in the popular culture that like evil Spock, goatee, evil McCoy, it's the evil doppelganger versions of them.
Yeah.
So and that could be, again, that could be another thing about modern audiences being more aware of things like that. Maybe they weren't so aware back then. I saw it when watching it because I think you had mentioned it to me ahead of time before I watched the movie, and it's like, I noticed a little bit of it now, especially because you mentioned it. But at least it's like, I still try to put myself in the mind of someone who's watching it back then sometimes, and it's like, I can see where the audience back then might not have been as suspicious of those things. But he still is able to do some clever things. Like he's observant enough to notice that Flambeau orders a ham sandwich on Friday when he's disguised as a priest. And that kind of gives away the game that, this is the guy. He's observant enough not to be distracted by the things going around, to still notice little details like that. Unfortunately, later on, they make him, I think, a little bit more, not buffoonish, but he's not as careful. And some would say that it's like just showing that he's human. Well, okay, that's fine. That's part of the character too, to show that he's human. It felt a little bit that he was clumsy in ways. Like he dropped the wrapper, right? He loves the chocolate, and the police are trying to catch him and Flambeau, and he drops a chocolate wrapper, which the police identify with him. Because it tells us that they're on this trail. It's like, well, that's something I don't think he would have done. He's careful in some ways and observant in some ways. In other ways, he just the movie doesn't seem consistent on that point. Did you notice that too? Not so much, maybe?
No, I noticed it. I will say this is my biggest negative of the movie. And I was debating myself if I wanted to say this. The movie started droning on for me after a little while. And so I was kind of like, I was paying attention to it, but I was also struggling to pay attention to it at times. I think that's probably because, I am a big fan of detective movies. And I understood going into this one, was, got some comedic elements to it. But, once the mystery was wrapped up for me, it was kind of like, oh, well. I did like the character work. Again, character work's great.
The characters are what make the film, really, because the mystery comes. Actually, it's less of a mystery in some ways than it is just a moral questioning of two characters, in their position in life, and that's where the interest is. Like you said, and that's character centric. Because look, the cross itself that they're struggling over, if you want to call it that, it's like it becomes a background, right? All the stuff with the police becomes background. I'm guessing that's probably what threw you, I think. And there's some Deus Ex Machina stuff that that took me out of it a little bit too, where some things are just given to Father Brown. It's like he could have figured that out on his own. He's about to, he's about to figure something out on his own. The movie kind of does a little thing where he has a bumbling moment and his glasses get broken and he can't see the thing that would give away the game and tell him the thing he needed to find Flambeau. And then 2 seconds later, someone offers him a wine bottle with the same thing on it that tells him, oh, okay. Yeah. So that kind of stuff, if you take that stuff out of it, yes, there's gaps there. And I was always looking forward to when are they going to put these two characters back together? Because that's when the movie takes off, right? And for me, it's like, it will always be worth watching for that. I just don't see myself coming back to it a lot, but for a movie like this, I will be coming back to this just for those parts alone. I don't know about you. Would you watch it again?
If someone turned it on in front of me,
how about a short reels, like someone just collapse like a best of collection, just the best scenes.
Potentially. When we picked this movie, I just went and looked at it. I just went and watched it and everything. And midway through the movie, I'm thinking to myself, why is this movie just not called Father Brown? And then sure enough, I go look it up and I go, it is called Father Brown in England. I never really understood and don't necessarily care to understand why, other than it's probably a bad decision, why this movie was ever renamed The Detective when it should have just been named Father Brown the whole entire time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so it kind of throws me off the movie a little bit. It feels like you don't care when the expectations, and it feels like you don't care. as much as you should. The other thing is, now this is a side to everything else. This did a little bit like push me out of the story at the first part of this. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wait a minute. And this is a very niche thing I'm going to say. And you'll understand this because, we've been doing this for
a while now.
Quite some time. Now, they introduced Father Brown, and the way they introduce him is he gets in trouble with the law. And who does he get in trouble with the law for? Well, one of his own parishioners. And who is his parishioner? Well, my brain immediately went to the other Alec Guinness movie that we watched. What was the name of it again?
Oh yeah, it was. I'm trying to think of it now, but why my mind's blank. I'll think of it later.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We watched that movie, and lo and behold, the same actor who plays he's the same person.
Yeah, he looked familiar to me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was Shorty or something, or one of the other guys. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a low-level criminal, trying to go right or eventually going right. Wore the same clothing. I mean, of course they wore the same clothing. Both those movies, I'm pretty sure, their settings were the same time period. And so I was immediately just like, wait a minute, what?
I'm telling you, in fact, it's like as another parallel, both movies also went back and forth between London and Paris, or England and Paris. So who would you? I mean, if you were like casting not a TV series, but let's say you wanted to do a movie version again of the same story we just saw now in 2024, who would you cast in it? Who would you want to direct it?
I don't know about direct it. If I had to pick an actor, because I think he's played it. You know what? I might pick one of the Spider-Men. I might pick either Tom Holland or
Tobey
Andrew
Maguire?
Garfield. Andrew Garfield. They're both British, for starters.
All right.
They're both got that kind of charismatic aloofness that they could portray the Father Brown character. I don't know if the Father Brown character's like he's supposed to be older or anything like that. If I had to pick older, I think a character that could probably do some like real character work here, and it'd be good, would be Mike Myers.
Really, Michael Myers from like Wayne's World and and all that, huh? Really?
I think if they had made a Father Brown movie, like an American version of this movie, and they wanted the character to be older, Mike Myers, that would have
really. That's interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think of who plays a quiet, reserved, because I'm sure he can do that. I always think of Mike Myers as a bit over.
I'm looking at like more of the comedic elements.
Yeah.
Here, because I would also make this movie, more of a comedy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of comedies now they can really pull off dramatic themes. They can pull off heartfelt stories, heartfelt lessons, things like that.
Yeah.
Those are some people that I would definitely pick.
You got me thinking about comedians now. I'm thinking that at least visually speaking, I could see someone like, if you're familiar with Jim Gaffigan, the comedian.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think he could do it. As far as Flambeau, I was thinking Flambeau came to mind right away, like Robert Downey Jr., simply because he's had a troubled past himself, first of all. And he actually kind of looks like he could, visually, I could put him in there. I think he would be a good kind of adversary, play the adversarial role there.
If I went down the Tom Holland route, I would actually star him opposite his girlfriend, Zendaya. Or Zendaya, I think that's her name.
In the
yeah, I'd make her Flambeau.
Oh, really?
100%.
Okay.
Yep, I would make her Flambeau. I'd put him as Father Brown and make her Flambeau, and I would do that because of their actual in-world and on-screen chemistry that I've seen them have as well.
I wanted so badly to get to trust me on this film. I just don't think I could get there. I was trying to be honest with myself, and I really ended up landing on Belongs in a Museum. It's got plenty of good in it that's worth rewatching, but almost all of it for me was concentrated in the chemistry of the two main actors. And when they're not on screen together, it ranges from anywhere from just decent, if Father Brown's doing something, kind of interesting on his own, or it gets kind of silly at times in terms of the plotting. So, yeah, for me, it belongs in a museum. How about you, man?
I think I'm going to agree with that. Belongs in a museum. And I would maybe, like, if I knew the source material better, I would probably say this. But I mean, if you, even without knowing the source material, like I always like to dig into I always like to dig into every kind of like every little piece of lore of any kind of media that there is, especially if I really love that media. So, if you've read the books or you've watched the television series and you did not know that this movie existed, then I fully recommend it because it's a part of that author's creation. I'm not looking at his name, so I don't remember it offhand. Yeah, it's part of his creation, and that's a good way to appreciate what he's created. If nothing else, it belongs in a museum. I'm definitely not going to go back to it anytime soon. I probably wouldn't just be like, "Hey, I want to watch Father Brown today."
Yeah,
but come to mind. If it was in front of me, I wouldn't be like upset and go, "I don't want to watch this right now," or walk away.
If it was someone else in your family said, "Hey, I haven't seen this yet," and you said, "Okay, we can watch that." I've seen it before, but I can watch it. Yeah. That about wraps it up on our take on The Detective, or Father Brown, or whichever name you want to go with. And as always, Ryan and I invite you to follow us on your favorite podcast platform if you're enjoying the journey as much as we are. Always glad to have you on board. So tell us, Ryan, what do we have for next week?
Next week, we have another story based on detective work, character work, things like that. This one is going to be a little bit of a more hard hitter in terms of discussion, likely, just because of the heavy themes of this movie and the real world implications of this movie. The next movie is In the Heat of the Night.
In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah, In the Heat of the Night.
With Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger, I believe, right? And those are the two main actors, I think, in it. So
I'm not looking at it right now, but I'm going to go with your...
We're going to go with what I did.
Yeah. Go with what you just said.
Yes. I know what I'm talking about, people. Really. The only thing I know about this film, aside from the actors, have you ever heard the line, "They call me Mr. Tibbs"?
Mm-hmm.
I finally get to see, hopefully, what the context of that line is. Because that's one of the, it's weird to say this, but that's one of the things I've been wanting to see this film for, just so I can put that into context. Anyway, so that's our show this week, guys. Anything else you want to say, Ryan?
I don't think so. I will say, though, kind of on the lines of what you just said, it is always neat when we can put more of a face to pop culture references, pop culture icons, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there is a lot of stuff out there that's like you've heard phrases over and over again, and you probably didn't know that, yes, that does actually come from somewhere. That does have meaning from something.
Yes.
It's always really cool when you can find the origin and glean the meaning from that.
Yeah. For me, it's like, and this is a bit of a sidetrack, but as someone who's a big fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, there's a whole lot of jokes that just went over my head. And every now and then, one of the original sources of it will come up in its original context, and it'll just hit me, And there's a bit of a jolt of I don't know what I want to call it, like satisfaction from hearing it. So yeah, there's the satisfaction of finally hearing the proper context of the thing you've only heard referenced before. Someone needs to make a word that means that, and then we'll put it in the dictionary. Maybe we should come up with it, Ryan. Maybe we should come up with it. But that'll be a topic for another day, maybe. So until then, folks, have a good one, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye-bye.